Fellow viewer, and welcome back to a new episode of Hammer D20, the show that is ready to criticize any film with its hot cup of apple cider and sneer as it watches these films with extreme prejudice. I think this is rotten. Ugh. It's got a lot of stuff in it. Ugh. Anyway, my name is Steven Sobot, and I will be your guide. So, a couple of weeks ago, I had attended the Hamilton Film Festival and had watched a lot of the films being screened there. In addition to that, another piece of significance was that my own documentary that I had worked on, which initially I had called King Peter's Guard, I think I'm going to change the name, to Chetnik's The Serbian Revolution, was screened during the Hamilton Film Festival on Cable 14 itself. It was a documentary that spoke about the Serbian community that had emigrated from the former Yugoslavia after World War II. This community was made up of a group called the Chetniks, a small rebel guerrilla army that emerged during World War II after the Yugoslav National Army was defeated by the Axis, and was intended to reinstate their exiled king back into power and oppose the fascist and communist forces commanding their country. If you know European history, you'll know that the Chetniks had lost World War II. Communism and socialism took over Yugoslavia as well as a lot of Eastern Europe, and those who were enemies of that governing ideal were made public enemies and were to be exiled from the country. And so many of these Chetniks, these people who are war veterans, had to leave and scatter and run away to different parts of Europe or North America or Australia to find a place to call their home. Many Serbs who are Chetniks found Hamilton as their own home, being as it had a strong industrial workforce that you can be employed at. And so even to this day, there's somewhere around 15,000 Serbs that live in the city. My documentary talks about these war veterans, about their journey throughout Europe to Canada, their journey living in Canada, as well as the younger generations about their experience with the community and their own people. So if you want to check it out and find my documentary, you can look for it on my YouTube channel. But enough about me. I'm making this episode to talk about the Hamilton Film Festival. The film festival, which ran from November 5th to the 13th, premiered in 6 locations: the Westdale Theatre, the Staircase Theatre, the Playhouse Theatre, Starlight Drive-In Theatre, and the newly built Ancaster Memorial Arts Centre, as well as on Cable 14 itself, screening somewhere around 80 films throughout the week, not only from Hamilton, but from the whole world. This film's theme was sci-fi and included many films of the genre, ranging from spooky to intriguing to just downright odd. So without further ado, let's jump in and take a look at what the Hamilton Film Festival had to offer. So before we start, I just want to mention that I might not include every review or every notes that I had included. Sometimes I don't want to give too much negative criticism to these films, particularly ones that are from Hamilton, because as much as maybe there's some things that could be fixed or could be said, I don't want to be too negative on local filmmakers. I still want them to try and get better. Do note, I guess, if I do mention criticism, if you're a local Hamilton filmmaker and you do know me, you do see me, there's nothing personal. I'm just trying to mention things that I liked and didn't like in the films that I'd seen. So the first category I'd watched was on Sunday, November 6th at the Staircase Theatre, and the category was the From Hamilton category. The first film I saw was called Ramblings of a Middle-Aged Drag Queen. It was 10 minutes, directed by Aharon Djindjihashvili, that's probably a butchering, and written by Darren Stewart Jones. It is described as an inquisitive journalism student interviews a world-weary drag queen about her life and career. The film kind of feels a bit like a documentary. It's filmed in such a way that's kind of has a bit of that kind of, you have the interview and you have the answers and this and that, and then you have some scenes that almost like B-roll that explains the situation. However, it is very much a fictional film, at least I think it is. And although the film was shot pretty well, some of the acting I found was a little wooden in this one. Between the two people, there was, let's say, 1-2 shot, just like, you know, over the shoulder, over the shoulder, over the shoulder, over the shoulder kind of shots. The plot was okay. There wasn't really much to say about this one. It was kind of short. It was 10 minutes. And didn't, I'd say it was fine. It did what it needed to do. As I say, there's not much else to say about it. The second film I had seen was called I Know What You Are. It's 35 minutes and it's directed by Tyler Davies and Braden Wilmer. It's a murder mystery where a detective tries to uncovering missing persons, chasing after an odd, unusual assailant to uncover a potential dark secret that the detective has. This film is a little longer, actually 3 times longer than the previous one, and it's a little paced slowly. I find that there's a lot of just kind of shots that drag on a little longer than they need to. There's not a lot of dialogue, although some of the audio work is very good. It also has some of those things where I feel like it's like the point of it is open to interpretation as to why the things in the film are happening. Very much hallucination kind of scenes happen, or at least scenes that are dreams or nightmares or something along those lines that don't actually happen, or maybe what's a nightmare, what's a dream. Kind of has those open to interpretation ideas. It's not particularly clear as to why or how. We're kind of introduced to characters that we might need to know prior, but don't know too much. I found it wasn't too clear about some of the points. It does build up tension very nicely, and I find that the lighting, considering everything, is actually really nicely done. The shot composition is nice. I find that the camera work and the way where they basically point the camera gets a good piece of what you're trying to get. And the lighting is creative enough to so that kind of idea that you don't want to show too much, you just show what's kind of importance. The third film of this category was called Sincerely Yours. It was 35 minutes and directed by A.J. Bate. It is described as, after the death of her mother, Claire navigates her life being a single mother, her midlife crisis, and her distant siblings. This film goes through the main character's mother's funeral, where she meets with her siblings and they're discussing funeral details and kind of people are grieving over her, whereas the main character's kind of more concerned about where her estranged daughter is. As the film continues, we go through the emotional states of all 3 children, and then for the last half of the film, we go through the main character's life that's kind of slow and monotonous and kind of miserable in a way. She then understands that she has been affected a lot by her mother and that she is much more similar to her than she thought she would be, to which then she starts to try to change some things in her life to make things better for herself and those around her. I thought that the characters were very human. You really felt like they actually existed. At the beginning, the pacing is really well done. Near the halfway point, in the last, like, say, 15-20 minutes of the film, it gets a little slow. And I think all of this kind of slow pace goes back to show just how monotonous and maybe meaningless her life is in her mind. There's one thing I will say that's a criticism for this film. It's that there are some audio issues. Some of the scenes when inside, you can hear the background hissing kind of entering when they start speaking. When no one's speaking, you can't hear it. It's kind of silent. Regardless, besides that, it ends nicely, and of the films in this category, it's probably my favorite. The next category that happened on Sunday, November 6th, The Staircase, was Around the World International Shorts films. The next film was called An Encounter. It was 20 minutes. It was from Ireland. The director is Kelly, and written by Mark O'Halloran. It stars 2 young Irish boys who are skipping class, and they mostly, throughout the film, walk around town trying to figure out things to do and kind of go on their own individual adventure. It really does feel like a very much coming-of-age kind of story. This film is quite slow-paced and not a lot happens. They're kind of just them talking very almost staccato. It does very much feel like 2 young Irish boys, kind of 2-line sentences about them kind of chastising each other, chewing each other out, insulting other people, or, you know, chewing other things. The dialogue was very well done. It's just 1 or 2 lines of just the boys kind of asking questions that are very much just like, what's that? Oh, nothing. That's pretty much just it. There's 2 kids. There's a taller, skinnier one and a shorter, fatter one. The taller, skinnier one seems to be sad that he's going to be moving away to Australia, whereas the shorter, fatter one's a little bit more terse, but is kind of I guess you could say in a friendly young boy way, trying to be comforting and like his own kind of, oh, who cares? Oh, let's just have fun with it right now. Oh, it's okay if you leave. This place is a dump kind of thing. You know, it's not that big of a deal. They're throwing stones at like a cruise ship from the UK, and they're just like, oh, just go back there. There's nothing here. Pacing is very slow, but it kind of works for the film. It kind of goes through the ideas of this depression that the kid's going through, understanding what it is going through, and then certainly when you go for open to interpretation, well, there's certainly an interpretation that you can tell. Something's happening here, right? And that's what I like about it. So this one gets a pass from me. Very well done. The third one in this category is called The Owl. It's 24 minutes. It's from Hong Kong, directed by Sam Wong. It follows around this fortune teller who's a little terse and a little cold, who tells the fortune of this girl who he says has no use, will amount to nothing, and will basically live a miserable and luckless life. As she tries to break out and understand why he gave her this awful fortune, when he says that it's all based on fate, she then tries to change her own fate by trying to become a fortune teller herself, to understand where the fortunes come from, and realizing that the fortune teller himself has his own terrible fate that befalls him. The film is done really well and shot pretty nicely. It certainly kind of follows a plot trajectory that I'm not really familiar with. I think this whole idea of fate is very much more of an Eastern idea, whether than Western. Not that Western ideas don't follow fate, but certainly its probably significance has more weight in Hong Kong than here. It's kind of a little repetitive, not a lot happens, and in the end she tries to save him by breaking her own fate. So it was okay. Not something that I would write home about, really, other than the episode that I'm doing for right now. The next film in this category is called Patalti, or translates to Holy Water. It's 24 minutes, it's from India, it's directed by Mukund Narayan and Santosh Singh. It follows a little 13-year-old boy who's looking for, quote, holy water, which he has noticed as bubbling still water. His grandmother reprimands him for spending so much time looking for this water because his grandfather is suffering from some kind of illness and is a constant fugue state and a feverish dream state, asking for Patalti, for holy water. The boy then goes on an adventure to try to find Patalti, and basically the whole film is just him climbing Himalayan mountains, as far as I can tell, of just trying to get this holy water. It's 20 minutes realistic of this kid climbing. Nonetheless, at least it was an interesting concept, and I kind of liked it, although it was extremely slow in the sense of just watching this kid climb these mountains. Another film in this category was called Split Ends. It was 14 minutes, from Iran, directed by Alriza Kazimapur and written by Solmaz Mortazavand. It's about two different characters at a police station where their cars have been impounded for separate reasons, all pertaining to their own hair. The woman was not wearing her hijab inside her car, and therefore her car was impounded for these rules. And the man, who has extremely long and nice hair, and the man's car was impounded because they thought he was a woman inside a car not wearing a hijab because of his long and nice hair. The woman argues that the car is the privacy of her own, but the DMV officer argues that the car itself was in public view, and therefore she broke the law. She can only get her car back if her father picks it up because she can't own the vehicle, and her father is very sick, and she takes care of him while driving that car. So it's kind of an unusual dichotomy of the kind of traditionalist religious situation that befalls Iran. Again, similarly, this one's acted quite nicely and filmed very well. Audio works, and the plot is certainly one of those like kind of eye-opening, or more so kind of, oh yeah, that's what happens in Iran. It's kind of quite a restrictive culture. Is it my favorite? Probably not, but certainly does what it needs to be. The last film in this category is called Lost Footage. It is 666 seconds. It's from Romania, and it's directed by Adrian Tofai. And this film is, by and large, maybe the most polarizing of this entire film festival. I'll just read the notes that I had written. Minute 1, there's nothing. Minute 3, this film is just nothing. Postmodern drivel. It's the kind that hopes that it wins awards with the least amount of effort. I would call this absolute bull. I can still hear the foot tapper who was tapping the whole night. Poor person, they probably have something. Minute 5, someone had left the theater. I'm wondering when someone will talk. Oh my god, the foot tapping. Minute 6, exit sign is interesting. Minute 7, this is not going to break me. Minute 8, this is an attack on me. I know what they're doing. I could have done this and been called a brilliant filmmaker. I bet people can hear me writing on scribbling all my anger. Minute 10, the film had ended. I guess it was shorter than I thought. I'm not giving you anything else. That's all I'm giving you. Out of all these films in this category, I would probably say An Encounter was the best one. I probably just have a biased appreciation for Irish culture, or at least the ideas of kind of the adult languages young Irish kids use. And it feels really human. Like, I would say this would probably be the most perfect indie film because it has that open for interpretation idea, but certainly it always feels with a bit of depression, a little bit of sadness, and how do they go through sadness? Usually in a whole part that I didn't even mention about this film that's pretty nasty. That really works with the film. But nonetheless, I would say An Encounter is probably my favorite of this category. Well, now before we talk about any more films, let's take a short break. See you soon. Welcome back, and now on to our next category. The next category that I covered was the Loft Shorts. Loft stands for Ladies of Film and Television, so it's a category specifically dedicated to films that are directed by or made by women. And the first one is a very interesting one that kind of relates very closely to this show and the topics in hand. Is called No Girls Allowed. It's a 60-minute documentary directed by Courtney Dealin. It is called an empowering documentary set out to inspire change by calling out toxic sexism and geek culture. The film basically talks to a bunch of female geeks who are incorporated into nerd culture in some way, shape, or form, and how they're effectively, maybe abused is the wrong word, but mistreated, or I kind of have to go through the rigmarole by males who are in this geek culture, who are kind of treating them poorly and assuming that they're just not real geeks. They're not a part of the boys' club, which very much does exist. As someone who probably has, if anything, indirectly been a part of this or has not helped the situation, I can guarantee you this has happened, and I kind of feel bad sometimes. But nonetheless, a lot of this film kind of went over a lot of topics, such as how video games are generally marketed towards men, yet not all video gamers are men. And in the same sense, movies aren't necessarily made just for men. They're made maybe with men in mind, or some films are made with women in mind, but they're kind of made with everybody incorporated. So why is there a boys' club? Why is there this ownership towards it? As I mentioned, women, when in these group situations, have to prove that they're a real nerd, quote, being completely knowledgeable in every insignificant fact or detail or character in their fandom, whereas if a man were to join this group, they don't have to go through that. Audio was good, visuals were good, nothing I can really criticize about it. It was a good piece and kind of fit exactly everything I'd want in a documentary, really. The second film in this category is called Punch Drunk. It's 5 minutes, it's directed by Eddie Bruins and written by Sacha Tsaronis. It's a simple and short film. It just has two young women in a parking lot, and one of them asks them to punch them. When she does, she gets this exhilarating feeling, and then she goes in to give the other woman a kiss. The other one's a little off-put by the kiss, but then asks to be punched later, and that's pretty much all the film is. Filmed nicely, nothing too crazy, doesn't need to be anything more than that. 5-minute short film that gets the point across without going too overboard. There's not really much else to it, though. The next film in this category is called Desmond's Not Here. It's a 16-minute film directed by Mabatho Macho, I probably butchered that, and Lindway Suttel and Mueller Westernhagen. And this film, by and large, might be my favorite out of the entire film festival. It's a fantastic film that follows around a middle-aged woman taking care of her dementia-riddled mother as they're packing up their house and taking her to a nursing home. The mother keeps asking for Desmond, who we don't know exactly who that is until revealed later that's probably her brother. And the main character, Abigail, kind of just keeps telling her that Desmond isn't there anymore. Desmond isn't there, and the mother keeps asking for Desmond, forgetting who this woman is in front of her, not realizing that it is her daughter. There's a great scene near the middle where it's the mother's birthday and the daughter has gotten her a cake, and the mother's just saying, I'm not blowing out the candles, I've got to wait for Desmond. And then the daughter frustratingly says, Desmond's not coming, and the mother just waits anyway for Desmond, and then the daughter just blows the candles out for her. It's a very touching story. It's great tension and builds up a lot in just 16 minutes. It's a great story, and this is exactly kind of, in my opinion, what an indie film needs to be. Lit well, shot well, acted fantastically. The mother is perfect, beautiful, absolutely like knockout punch acting, as is Abigail's acting. Another film in this category is called Beautiful Disaster. It's a 7-minute documentary in Canada, directed by Cher Obadiah. The film is an intimate portrait of one woman's story of domestic violence and how she made the difficult journey from shame to shine. It's an interesting film, voiced over in a very poetic sense, as the main character has difficulty kind of in a relationship that we don't see, and how her outlet was kind of through poetry. She kind of accepts different parts of her native culture and tries to get into holistic healing and that kind of stuff, and encouraging others to get out of their own negative situations. It's an okay film. It was shot okay. Like, not much to say about it. Certainly, it's one of those, it's not my cup of tea, but certainly probably speaks to somebody else. So I'll just move on. I'm kind of running out of time right now, so I just want to mention there were 3 other films in this category: Grandmothers and Island Drifts and When She Was Good. All of them are good in their own rights, but certainly there were some things that I thought, you could use something else, could use this, could use that. Just didn't really speak to him as much as some of these other ones did. And that's that for the category. By and large, there's no argument. My favorite film in this entire category is Desmond's Not Here. Very powerful, tells a great story that's something that you can really attach to, you know? On Friday, November 11th, I went to the Westdale Theatre and they were talking about mixed shorts, which was kind of a big mix of films from all parts of the world, mostly Canada and US, that were short indie films. The first one we saw was called Lucy. It's a 13-minute film in the US, directed by Emma Sofia Bazzuoli, and written by Daniel Robert and Emma Sofia Bazzuoli. It follows a gay man who orders food and receives it from a driven robotic drone, but instead of his food, gives him a baby. It has a mysterious and humorous vibe to it, where they don't know what to do with this baby and why this baby was locked up in a drone, basically. And when they're trying to figure out what to do with it, they think to call the cops. They think, well, no, call the cops, because now they've kidnapped the baby. To which then their next door neighbor, a nosy older woman, reveals that she's this criminal that's using the baby as some kind of like drug mule, and it's kind of a weird, kind of funny film. Unusual, interesting, filmed well, shot very nicely, interesting sci-fi feel to it, but certainly interesting. The next film in this category is called Baba. It's 13 minutes from Canada. It's directed by Anya Chirkova and Mehran Ismail Soy, and written by Maziar Khatam. It follows around a middle-aged Iranian man having trouble with paying the rent in his apartment. He doesn't know English. The landlord comes and tries to knock some sense into him and calls his son to go deal with the landlord. The son is kind of frustrated because he has to interrupt his life to take care of his dad, where his dad's not really taking responsibility in any way, shape, or form for his own self-destructive life. And the son, out of frustration, out of this mental manipulation the father's applying to him, as well as everyone else in his life, slaps him and leaves him what seems like a final time. It's a very powerful and quite depressing film, but certainly does tell a story that's very impactful. I really like this kind of story where I can get where the director and the writer are coming from. Filmed nicely, acted nicely, voiced over just perfectly. It's a nice little indie film, and this is probably my favorite in this category. The last film in this category is called Pit and Pendulum. It's 27 minutes. It's actually directed by J. Aldrich Godet. The plot of this film is based off the Edgar Allan Poe short story of the same name, where there's a person who was captured and imprisoned for a crime that we don't know by the Spanish Inquisition and is sentenced to life and death in prison. And later they are strapped to this table where a giant metal pendulum is swinging back and forth and lowering onto them to slowly kill them. They escape their situation by putting food that they're given onto the straps that are tying them down, so that the rats that have also made the prison their home eat away at the straps and let the prisoner escape. The walls of the prison closing in on them and heating up, trying to boil them alive. Eventually, the heat is stopped, the prison opens up again, and they're set free from some force. Depending on your patience with kind of older English writing and kind of the verbosity that Edgar Allan Poe can be, it can get a little tiresome, but overall it's still like an impactful film in its own way. As mentioned, I'm skipping through some of these, so I'm just going to quickly review the ones that I didn't talk too much about. One of them was called Wicked Plans, where there's a guy who wants to kill a governor, but it's Halloween, so they think he's in a suicide bomb costume or something like that, and it's kind of weirdly comedic. I didn't really laugh at it too much. Another one was called Surrender. It's about a recovering compulsive gambler, where she keeps gambling, and it was fine. I don't know. It was fine. Another one was called Figures that had fantastic action, and like it was the fight choreography was amazing, but the story was really cringy. I mean, sorry guys, if it's any one of the films that the guys might actually hear, it might be these guys. I really didn't like the story. It's very like everyone was too cool for the world around them, and the whole world, like, it's like a video game kind of thing. I don't know, it's okay, it's whatever, to each their own. The last category that I reviewed was called Emerging Shorts, made mostly by students and emerging filmmakers. As I said, kind of running out of time, so I'm gonna kind of shotgun through these and kind of give a plus and a minus about it. The first film, Flashback, it's about a teen is questioned after several of her friends are found dead. Done by teenagers who are 13 to 17, so a lot of the stuff does seem amateur, and anything I would criticize is kind of excusable, but you know, so there's room for improvement, but at least I kind of like the ideas that they were going for. The second one, Apep's Curse, was also done by 13 to 17-year-olds from the Hamilton School of Media Arts. I didn't like this one as much because I also really couldn't hear things happening in the film. The music or the background audio was a little too overwhelming and their voices were kind of muffled by that. Passing By was done by the Hamilton Acting Studio. It's described as a series of interactions between Hamilton strangers. There were some good scenes in here where there was some humor that was kind of funny. I think there was a lot of scenes that were happening, kind of some backstory that we didn't know of. We weren't sure what was connected to what. A lot was happening in this film, and it was only just 11 minutes. But it was pretty good. Vibe With Me, which is 6 minutes and directed by Jay Ing, is described as an artist struggling from self-worth, find some inspiration. We're pretty well shot and acted nicely. Not a ton happens, but it's mostly just about how an artist is struggling with kind of figuring out what she's worth and then finds a girlfriend that kind of shows them what they're worth. There's a lot of dancing in this as well. Meters Running, it's 8 minutes, done by Anna Di Giovanni, where it follows a cab driver who's been recently divorced and is having a hard time accepting that she and her ex are officially over. Very well acted, lots of good things to this. I found that it was black and white and really didn't need to be in black and white, that's okay. Cocaine Caddy is 13 minutes by Steel Bay, where it's about a young man with no car who is blackmailed into selling cocaine, and he needs a ride to get to the deal, so he calls a cab. I found this one was probably my favorite of the bunch. A lot of the acting and editing was very frenetic, and I kind of liked what was happening there. The lighting and the voicing and the volume, like it had the best elements, I would say, of all the films here, kind of working together. Everything made sense, the plot was intriguing, and you kind of wanted to know what happened afterwards. So pretty good. Alfie was 12 minutes by Emily Ryder. It's about a boy, Alfie, who begins a journey of self-exploration in which he looks to push the boundaries of binary gender expression. Set during the 60s, so obviously people are a little bit more stiff to those kind of ideas, especially Alfie's father, who's a very traditional kind of dad. This one was acted very well, especially for the kids. Shot and edited fantastically. 1033, 12 minutes by Taryn Lawson and Elisa Bruno, where a paramedic battles her demons wherein a traumatic work event takes over her life. Acting great, audio great. Very human, lots of good things happening here. It is open to interpretation exactly what happens in the end, but it does seem like she had accidentally killed her mother, or maybe somebody else did and she couldn't save her mother. But it was pretty good. Nothing to complain about here. Yesterday Will Hurt, 29 minutes by Serafina Faraci, written by Emily Bach, Serafina Faraci, Abhishek Mishra, and Megan Butarati, where it follows Joey Walker, pessimistic, hot-headed 17-year-old who suffers from frightening flashbacks from her childhood. It does seem like an intro to a character or a story that we're hoping to get more of. A lot happens, also not a lot happens. It's a little slow. She's just kind of going through a moody phase in her life. Again, from a technical standpoint, I can't really think of anything worth complaining about. I think it's just kind of a little slow. And that's about that for the emerging filmmaking part. I think I mentioned, but in this category, my favorite was probably Cocaine Caddy. I think it's just my own bias for that kind of plot. Doing the right thing, doing the wrong thing, being coerced, and that kind of stuff. And that was the last of the films that I had reviewed or looked at. Of this entire film festival and the films that I had watched, what was my favorite? Throughout this review, I've mentioned those that I've enjoyed the most in each category, but I would definitely probably point to my favorite as being Desmond Is Not Here Anymore. That one really just stood out for me. Something about it, just like, I don't know. There was just a lot to it that really screamed to me that was just impactful. Very good film and a very good plot that definitely felt extremely human. Tons of people suffer with this kind of idea, both people who suffer with dementia and those who have to suffer with those who have dementia. And that about concludes my review of the Hamilton Film Festival. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you sooner than later. Have a good day.